You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Lululemon just made the coziest matching set to get you to and from Pilates. Meet the Steady State hoodie and sweatpants, a fan favorite from our men's line, reimagined in Superloft fabric that's smooth on the outside, fleecy soft on the inside. Level up your comfort in the new Steady State Superloft, available now at lululemon.com.
Picture this, a curve in the road, a change in plans. Well, what do you say? With the all-new Audi Q3, the answer's always yes. Yes to adventure. Yes to escape. Yes to performance. Yes to comfort. Yes to right now. Because saying yes without hesitation, that's real luxury. The all-new Audi Q3, made for the yes life.
This episode is made possible by our Patreon members. Thank you so much.
And if you're not a member and you'd like to hear us more than twice a month, join our Patreon. Starting at just $2 a month, you can listen to exclusive episodes just for Patreon subscribers.
Go to patreon.com/ancienthistoryfangirl for more info. And as always, thanks for listening.
Shit is going down in the woods and we are not pleased.
You can taste the fear in the Senate chamber. It's palpable, like a living thing. It breathes and yawns and stretches its claws. If you're not careful, the fear will consume all of Rome. But you have a plan. Her name is Hespala. She can be bought, and your pockets are deep as the Tiber, because she will give you what you need, and what you need is worth a few paltry coins. Rome is out of control. It started slowly. You heard the rumors, secret gatherings, women slipping from their homes and worshiping an ancient god, women initiating young men into their cult, men who had not yet reached the age of majority, young men from all classes, young men from your class. You heard about the orgies, women and plebs and slaves, and God forbid your own son, holding late-night ceremonies deep in the woods, doing all manner of things, plotting all manner of things. You know the truth, what they are really planning late at night in the woods. These wild women and slaves, these young men with fortunes ripe for the inheriting. It happened to your neighbor. You can't prove it, but you suspect it. One day he was fine, and then the next he slipped into a poisoned sleep and never woke again. His son, who'd been known to slip away at night, to sneak into the woods, he inherited everything. And you have heard the rumors about your son, about what he has been doing late at night in those woods, and with whom, the lovers he's taken, men and women at the same time. You've heard of the company he keeps, freedmen, slaves, priestesses of Dionysus, and you know it won't be long before he decides it's time to relieve you of your fortune and your life. You've heard what her real plan is, this Pocula Ania, this priestess of the old god. She wants nothing more than to destroy your city, destroy your way of life. She wants to undo all the Roman Senate has worked so hard to provide. Order, stability, peace. You look at all the men seated around you. Some of them know. Some of them have been suspecting the truth for a long time. But now you will bring it to light. You nod at Hespala. Senators, we are gathered today to hear testimony of the gravest importance. Testimony of a traitorous rebellion that is being fomented in our very streets. I'm Jen McMenemy.
And I'm Jenny Williamson.
And this is Ancient History Fangirl. And I am so happy to still be in the world of Dionysus.
Yes.
In our last episode, we talked about the journey Dionysus took to become a god. We followed his travels across the Mediterranean, northern Africa, and India as he went on an epic quest to spread the cultivation of wine, a quest that actually mirrored the ancient path that wine cultivation and distribution took in the Mediterranean. It's almost like the two things were sort of linked.
Coincidence? I think not.
A wizard did it. It's obviously.
Vitellius did it.
Vitellius fixed it.
Right.
So in this episode, we're going to focus on what happened after Dionysus won his place as a god on Mount Olympus, and how the mortals down below on Earth came to worship and revere the mighty god of wine, liberation, revolution, masks, fertility, and rebirth.
Wait, hold up a second. Did we mention rebirth before? Did we talk about that in the last episode?
Well, we sort of touched on it. Dionysus' name does mean twice born.
Yeah, I guess, because he was born from his mom and Zeus's ballsack.
Yes, that ballsack birth.
Bare hands, very bloody cesarean section, and ballsack birth. Those are the two births that we're referring to here.
Yeah. You see, that's the mythology, what we covered in the last episode. But the thing is, now we're going to talk about the way people actually worship Dionysus, which is a little bit different.
Yeah, this was the question I kept having the last time we did an episode on Dionysus is, were there actually maenads ripping people limb from limb in the woods? I really need to have an answer to this question. I also need to know whether there were in fact orgies. I would like a blow-by-blow of all the orgy action.
And I'm surprised you didn't just bring up the penis parades right now.
Well, I knew there were penis parades. I mean, we all accept that there were penis parades. Like, that is fact.
So everything you're asking me is a little complicated.
As usual.
As always. And some of it has its own mythology involved, including that Dionysus became a sacrificial king who was ritually slaughtered to bring wine and the earth back to life.
Wait, we did not talk about that last time, right?
Yeah, no, we didn't, because that mythology contradicted the other mythology we talked about last week, and I didn't want to break everyone's brains the way my brain has been broken.
So this is why we needed part 2 of Dionysus. Now you see why we're still not done with Dionysus.
So, Jenny, I really fought for this episode, didn't I?
You really did. I had to be convinced.
You did, and it was because in our Julius Caesar episodes, and we told you the story of the Hound of Ulster and who the Celts were, we knew it was like a 2-parter. But at first, we thought it would just be a 1-part about the archaeology. But we realized for you to understand, you had to also understand like the rich storytelling culture. And when I was talking about Dionysus, I was like, oh my God, it's a whole chance just to tell you stories about how cool Dionysus was. And then I was like, well, you also have to understand why people worshipped him and how they worshipped him to get the fear that we're going to need in order to tell you the second half of the season. Because the second half of the season is all about people who rebelled against Rome. Particularly, it's about the 3 Servile Wars.
This kind of religion played a role in all of them. And it's really to achieve what we needed to do. Jen convinced me of this. To achieve what she wanted to do, her vision for this arc, what we really had to do was not just talk about the mythology, and we are going to talk about mythology in this episode.
Guys, I wrote this episode. Of course there'll be more mythology.
But we really had to focus on what people were doing on the ground and how they were really worshiping Dionysus, not just how Dionysus was worshipped in mythology, which is slightly different. And it's also just really super fascinating. So we thought we would delve into it a little bit more and really give it room and let it breathe.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the things that we loved about Dionysus so much is he's an underdog story. He's not a god who's just born and accepted and everyone loves him and yay, Dionysus. No, he has to go on this epic journey to prove that he should be worshipped, to prove that he has value and that he deserves his place. And you know, a lot of us can really relate to that. But the other thing about Dionysus that is so wonderful when I was doing the research is he is not your typical god. He's gender fluid. He's form fluid. He's just as likely to hang out with the poorest of the poor as he is to hang out with the kings and queens. And you know what? When he meets up with the kings and queens and they ask for something nice, he gives them exactly what they want, Midas. And it doesn't turn out so well.
When kings and queens hang out with Dionysus in the mythology that we've seen a lot of the time, they don't wind up better for it. Like, he winds up fucking over their life in some way. And he's consistently on the side of women. He's on the side of enslaved people and people who were at the margins of Roman society. And he really was a god for them. And that's why we were so drawn to him and why we felt like he had to be such an important part of this arc.
Yeah. And, you know, I think my very, very, very scant knowledge of Dionysus ahead of time was always this god of parties and theater and having a good time. And so this whole journey that I took learning more about him, I was like, man, I love him. He's amazing. Because he wasn't just about parties and having a good time.
Well, that was definitely part of it. But the fact that you thought that is testament to how strong the Roman sanitizing of Dionysus was. And we're going to get to that.
We're going to get to it. The fact that that's where my brain went immediately tells me that is the narrative people wanted me to believe.
The Romans wanted you to believe that because when it moved from Greece and other regions of the world to Rome, they really changed the mythology. And we're going to tell you all about that.
This episode is brought to you by Redfin. You're listening to a podcast, which means you're probably multitasking. Maybe even scrolling home listings on Redfin, saving homes without expecting to get them. But Redfin isn't just built for endless browsing. It's built to help you find and own a home. With agents who close twice as many deals, when you find the one, you've got a real shot at getting it. Get started at redfin.com. Own the dream.
TaxAct understands you haven't memorized the tax code. That's why TaxAct has live experts to help. TaxAct can even do it for you if you prefer. It's the easiest way to know you're doing it right. Well, other than going back to college and obtaining a bachelor's degree in accounting with a minor in finance, then interning somewhere and becoming fluent in all tax forms. But that might be hard to accomplish before tax day. So maybe just stick with TaxAct. TaxAct. Let's get them over with.
It's the Paradise Podcast.
I am your host, Ryan Michelle Bethay, with my husband, Sterling.
What's up?
Join us here on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus, where we'll discuss each episode with the cast and crew of Paradise. I'll be getting all the secrets from Dan Fogelman, James Marsden, Shailene Woodley, Julianne Nicholson, and Sterling Kelby-Brown. Woo! Paradise, the official podcast, is now streaming.
And stream Paradise on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus.
So let's move on.
So here we go. We're getting on with the episode. Religion in ancient Greece was very different from our modern religions. For a start, much of it wasn't written down and codified the way modern religions are. And by that, we mean there wasn't really a holy book or scroll like the Bible or the Torah or the Quran. And a lot of what we know about the ancient Greek religion was gleaned from mythology and poetry and theater, philosophy, art, sort of scraps of like bits and pieces on tombs. Many of the rites were so secretive that worshippers didn't write down the practices. So what we get are cryptic clues and letters and burial tablets, poetry and art that tells us what might have happened at certain festivals, but maybe not concretely what happened. And we're going to look at the worship of Dionysus through some of the major festivals and rites that celebrate him, including the Great Dionysia, or the City Dionysia in Athens, the Orphic Mysteries, and the Roman Bacchanalia.
So we're going to start with the Great City Dionysia. This was Dionysus's biggest festival and perhaps the best known festival that come down to us today about him, the Great City Dionysia that took place in Athens every year. The winter months were sacred to Dionysus. During these months, there were smaller feasts to honor the god, but celebrations culminated in the Great City Dionysia, which took place in March. It was the biggest festival in the calendar year, and it was epic by anyone's standards, because when you're throwing a party for Dionysus, it had better be epic.
Yeah, he ain't gonna come if you don't throw a good party.
It's hard to pinpoint an exact date when this festival began. We know that Dionysus was considered both a foreign god and one of the oldest gods of the ancient Greek pantheon. Dionysus is mentioned in Linear B, and Linear B contains the oldest attested fragments of ancient Greek writing and dates back to 1450 BC, which means that worship of Dionysus would have been happening since at least 1450 BC and probably a lot earlier than that. Dionysus was older than Greek civilization itself, and Dionysus was no doubt adopted into the Greek pantheon from the beginning of that pantheon's formation.
However, we don't know a lot about the Great City Dionysia pre-6th century BC, when the festival was refounded by the tyrant Pisistratus.
What an evocative name. Why was he a tyrant?
You know what, Jenny? I literally did not go down this rabbit hole. I'm sorry. I could have, but I was just like, there are so many rabbit holes I've already been down, including like German theory about Nietzsche and Dionysus and Apollo. And I was like, I have to draw a line. And that was my line.
If you want to know why the tyrant Pisistratus was a tyrant, you just are gonna have to Google it, because Jen didn't.
Jen did not do that work. But how exactly was this festival celebrated before its 6th century BC revival? We know a few things. A lot of them are focused on Minoan Crete, where I'm hoping to go back to maybe this year because I'm a little bit in love. Obviously not Minoan Crete, but just Crete in general, but maybe Minoan Crete.
We don't have a time machine.
Jenny, if I drink enough wine, Dionysus will give me a time machine.
It's gonna have a really bad catch to it that you won't find out.
It will. Everything I touch will be turned to Minoan Crete, and that'll be bad.
Exactly.
So here's what we know about Minoan Crete. There was snake handling involved in this worship of Dionysus, for instance, and women played a very important role. And the name Pentheus figured prominently. And we talked about all this stuff in our last episode, but we don't know enough to give you a complete picture of the most ancient Dionysian rites from Minoan culture.
Although Jen has some wacky theories.
I have some wacky theories because I saw a few things in my research, so I'm just going to put my little tin Minotaur hat on and tell you what I learned.
Please do.
First, Ariadne may or may not be related to the snake goddess of Minoan culture. Ariadne is the consort of Dionysus. She is the girl who helped Theseus get through the labyrinth, and then Theseus just dumped her on an island somewhere, possibly pregnant, because Theseus is the worst. Ariadne was also called the Lady of the Labyrinth, and there was a spiral dance that they used to perform in Minoan Crete. And some people said they had to pay homage to the Lady of the Labyrinth, who was Ariadne. In Minoan Crete, there was a labyrinth where the Minotaur, who was half man, half bull, was kept. And that sounds to me very similar to someone we've already seen, a god who is associated with bulls, who can turn himself into a bull, who can roar like a bull. Is it possible that Dionysus and the Minotaur could have, in ancient worship, somehow been connected to each other?
I think it's quite possible over here in fanfiction land.
In fanfiction land. Again, we all know that the Minotaur was the product of Pasiphae and her affair with the bull, and it was retribution for Minos doing some shady stuff. I'm just saying, to me, that evidence looks fascinating. And we know that the Minoans had a sort of worship of bulls. Their young men and women had this practice of bull jumping. And so, to me, it feels like maybe there's another story here, which again, I've got my tin Minotaur horned hat on. This is not actually anything I can attest or prove. I'm just in fanfiction land.
There is the story of the Minotaur that we all know, but there are all these intriguing hints that maybe it's based on older mythology that's been lost to us that had to do with Dionysus.
Yeah, exactly. And we can't prove it one way or another. To me, it's just interesting to speculate.
Right. We have active imaginations over here.
So if you're using us for some bizarre reason to write a paper for your university or high school, don't.
We're not responsible for your thesis.
Anyway, so the tyrant Pisistratus began the transition into what we think of now as the great city Dionysia.
He basically refounded the festival. It had existed before, but he reestablished it in the 6th century BC.
And we do know a lot about how the Dionysia was celebrated in the 6th century BC and beyond into the Greek classical period.
So the great city Dionysia was a festival dedicated to all the best things: drinking, dancing, live theater, penis parades, and quote-unquote overall lechery, which is probably my favorite thing in the world.
Is it though?
Look, Jen, overall lechery covers a lot.
True.
The Dionysia took place in March at the end of the winter months, which were sacred to Dionysus. It was a huge communal festival that took over the whole city of Athens. It involved lots of dancing, sometimes on oiled wineskins or animal skins, ancient world drinking games, parades throughout the city of Athens, ritual sacrifices, and theater. So, what did that citywide party look like? First, it's important to remember that Dionysus was a fertility god, and it's so easy to forget this part of his role because the wine, theater, and orgies tend to be the focus, but one of Dionysus's biggest roles was as a fertility god. This worship of Dionysus as a fertility god actually started in Thrace, where ritual orgies and Dionysian ceremonies were held. Is this where we talk about the orgies, Jen?
No, a little bit later.
No, so I'm just reading this next sentence, and it is not, according to Jen's thing that she wrote. But these...
I mean, believe it or not, guys, we rehearse these episodes. We outline when we should be talking about orgies and asking questions. And somehow, one of us, who's been drinking her Austin cider...
Listen, Jen, I just don't want to call down retribution from the god. I'm doing it for us.
All right, well, I'm going to go get some wine while you figure out where you were reading, because I'm a little worried about you.
I'm a little worried about us getting blasted by Dionysus and having to kill our loved ones, okay? So why don't you just drink up?
Wow.
I'm just trying to protect the podcast. I do it all for the podcast. All right, so where was I?
I don't know, you were just going off script again.
I was just trying to talk about the orgies, but apparently it's not time for that yet. But these ceremonies and orgies don't come down to us in the same way, and little is known about them. You cannot find them on Pornhub. They're not there.
Oh God, and if they are, please don't share any links.
Look, I really only want to see the real deal. If it's not a Thracian Dionysus orgy, then get the fuck out of here.
Praise Dionysus.
Anyway, we don't know anything about the Thracian Dionysus orgies. More pity to us. However, we can see glimpses of these ceremonies through the ancient Greek festivals like City Dionysia, because a part of the ritual of the City Dionysia was based in fertility and was held to remind the earth to wake the fuck up.
Yeah, like, it's time. It's time now. Get up, Earth.
Time.
So March was the end of the winter season, the time for the planting to begin again. It was also the time when the bees finally woke up from their winter slumber to start pollinating crops. So we talked about how bees were sacred to Dionysus in the last episode.
There's a whole lot of concern about the sleeping habits of the bees.
Now it was time for the light to return, which, thank you, Dionysus. If you are someone with seasonal affective disorder, which I am, you are just like, where's the light? Where's the light? Where's the light?
You know what, Jen? You just need to participate in more orgies. It would bring the light back sooner.
I'll talk to my husband about it. I'm not sure how he's going to feel.
I strongly suspect, that you are slacking in the orgy department.
Well, I guess maybe I'll have to leave it to you to do enough for both of us.
I only have orgies on my own behalf.
Oh, can't you just take one for the team here?
No! You have to do your own orgies. That's what I'm telling you.
If you're having an orgy already, can't you just have a second one for me? God, Caesar would.
Caesar's a better friend than me.
No, he's not. Absolutely not. No.
Oh, well, that's gratifying at least. I feel slightly better.
So anyway, I'm going to move us out of the orgies I will not be having.
The orgies I will not be having because I just feel it's an overstep. We're moving on.
So for all these reasons, a big part of the great City Dionysia was fertility rituals. And that's where the penis parades come in. Yes, Jenny, it's finally time. We're finally going to talk about them.
Woohoo! I mean, I am the perv of this episode. It's very clear.
You truly are.
I was excited about the penis parades, though. That was another thing that I was like, Jen, I just really need us to go into super detail on these penis parades. I want the how, I want the why, I want the where.
So anyway, when I was doing the research for this episode, one of the big things that both Jenny and I found fascinating was the fact that the ancient Greeks had penis parades for Dionysus, which seemed just like so different to what I was expected and awesome that I was like, shall I just take a day and go down this rabbit hole? And Jenny said, oh, you're already 2 weeks late on your episode. Go ahead.
I also said affirmative, please. This is the actual thing that I care about.
Everything else, she was like, do we need to know it? I'm like, yes.
So the festival would start with a massive procession dedicated to Dionysus that began just outside the city of Athens. This was meant to commemorate the god's original arrival in Athens. An image of Dionysus would be taken through the streets and carried up to the Theater of Dionysus on the south side of the Acropolis. The Theater of Dionysus was a huge amphitheater, and the seats would have originally been made of wood with marble seats at the front of the theater, which were reserved for the best men. Ugh. Or, most important, male members of society. Ugh. Once the statue or image of Dionysus was brought into the theater, the parade would end for the day. So that's it. We're done for the day. We can all piss off and get drunk. So the Theater of Dionysus, Jen discovered this in the course of her research, still exists. There's a website. You can go see it. And the website says, quote, we'll put a link in the show notes, quote, the Theater of Dionysus was used as a theater from the 6th century BC onwards. It was the first and largest theater to be built in Athens and could seat up to 17,000 people. And the combined adult ticket for the Theater of Dionysus, how much is that going to set you back? 30 euros.
I'm just going to say this. If you guys love us, we have a Patreon and we'd really like to go to the Theater of Dionysus.
We would. We sure would. So on the second day, the celebrations took on a different vibe. Once again, there was a huge citywide parade. The parade would be filled with noise, dancing, chanting, and the carrying of giant phalloi, or large sculptures resembling an erect penis.
And the thing about phalluses is they were very much considered good luck charms. Everyone wore them in Greece and Rome.
It wasn't like kind of a sort of pseudo-shocking thing like we might, at least modern Western eyes might see it like that. And there are places in the world where people still do this today. There's one in Japan, actually.
There are still places in Greece that have these penis parades.
The Barani Festival, which I'm probably mispronouncing, which is a fertility festival featuring penis parades.
I believe it's at the start of Lent season or the beginning of Greek Orthodox Easter. And maybe one day we'll be able to go and see the penis parades.
I think we should put this as a goal on our Patreon. If we make $1,000 a month, we will go to the penis parade and Instagram the fuck out of it. It'll be amazing.
We will. We will live stream from it.
Penis isn't a parade. It's awesome.
Penises in a parade is awesome. I also think that like vulvas in a parade would be awesome. Like I'm happy for all the reproductive organs to be in a parade to wake up the earth. Like, yes, please.
I think that would be amazing.
Right?
Fallopian tubes.
Uteruses, vaginas, everything.
The clitoris. The clitoris needs an 11-day parade.
Get the testicles in there.
So people marched through the city of Athens with giant erect phalloi, which were supposed to bring good luck and fertility, and these penises would be carried aloft for everyone to feast their eyes on. They were a feast for the eyes.
They were, and they were brightly decorated. This is a big party. It's a festival. It's a parade. And you know what, Jenny? It was a loud affair. Wine flowed freely. People danced on oiled wineskins. And I have to stop for a minute and explain what I mean here because this like kind of broke my brain a little bit. Because when I think of a wineskin, I think of like a tiny little bag that you drink wine out of, you know?
It's portable. You carry it on your belt or something.
Yeah, like you kind of see, I don't know, in something like Lord of the Rings.
Old-timey flask kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I think of. But this is not what they were dancing on. They were dancing on essentially like what you would use to store wine in. Like think about like a 10-pound sack of potatoes, but made out of like the skin of a bull. It's kind of like you're dancing on a small waterbed.
It's like kind of a large bag full of wine made of, I guess, like an exotic animal skin because these were animals sacred to Dionysus, right?
Yes. And the animals sacred to Dionysus were bulls, donkeys, tigers, goats, I think maybe leopards as well, panthers. Yeah, big cats, essentially. The skins were made from animals that were sacred to Dionysus, and people would drink and dance on the skins. And remember, these skins were oiled up and very slippery and uneven, and when someone fell off, that was a party foul. I imagine everyone would take another drink as they were dancing and keep right on celebrating.
And not only were the skins of these sacred animals present at the citywide parade and procession, but the animals themselves were in attendance. Tigers, goats, and donkeys were just hanging out in the streets being all worshipped because they deserved it. And then there was the thundering of the bull roarers, because one of Dionysus's other names, Bromios, means the thunderer. Dithyrambs, or wild choral songs dedicated to Dionysus, would be sung, and these would eventually take on the form of a singing competition.
As long as people could sing, they're like, let's have a sing-off.
That's right. So the city would be ringing with the deep and primal songs of the bull roarers.
And drumming, there would be loud drumming, there would be chanting, there would be probably all these feet moving and stamping and dancing, and it would just be incredible.
Yes, you can't sleep through it, forget it.
Get out there and enjoy that party.
So if you're a foreigner in the city, the resident foreigners of the city would be forced to dress in red. I don't know why.
As a resident foreigner in this country, I'm like, really?
You would be forced to wear red, Jen.
I'm not sure red is my color.
Jen has some wild theories, which she wrote down for me to read. So first, there are some Roman frescoes that depicted Dionysus with red hair. This is important because the religion of Dionysus became disseminated through Greece via Thrace, and ancient Thracians are portrayed a lot as having red hair and blue eyes. Could this dressing of foreigners be a nod to Dionysus' Thracian roots, or is it just an easy way to pick out strangers in your city? Jen is going with the Thracian roots. I say that vampires have red hair, Jen, and everyone knows that.
It's true. In ancient Greece, they believed that redheads were vampires.
Right. So all the foreigners are vampires.
When Jenny threw that tinfoil theory at me, I was like, of course. Now we can see why all the vampires are, because you can dye your hair.
Well, you could change your clothes too, but the point is that they want to know who the vampires are, so they made them dress in red. I'm not sure this tracks logically, but we're going to go with it.
We're going with it. It's like when I say, like, totally is a volcano's fault.
Blame the volcano.
Anyway, at the end of the procession, it was time for the animal sacrifices. 300 bulls were sacrificed to Dionysus, and 300 bulls would have been enough food to feed 70,000 people. So again, let's just picture the scene. The streets are lined with revelers, most likely dressed in their Dionysian attire with fox skins or leopard skins, flower garlands or garlands of ivy, carrying the thyrsus, which is essentially a penis staff made of fennel and topped with a pine cone, and white and red ribbons symbolizing blood and semen, or semen and wine. You take your pick. I'm not going to debate it.
Not going to die on the semen and wine hill.
I'm not. Some people have. I'm not one of them. The streets would have been sticky with blood and wine, and the noise from the singing and chanting and the bull roars would have been deafening. It would have been an organized chaos that was both incredible to behold and terrifying. Exactly what it meant to commune with the god of wine, ritual madness, and orgies.
You have to wear a full-body condom to go out in Athens.
Well, I mean, to be honest, if you're out in Athens at this point in time, you kind of want to get pregnant. Like, this is a fertility ceremony.
That's a really good point. You can really see that.
So after the ritual sacrifice, there would be much partying with lots of drinking and, of course, drinking games. Jenny, the next time we're on the same continent, which I don't even know when that's going to be, we should try out some of these ancient world drinking games.
We totally should. We should dance on some wineskins and see how that goes. Do you want to know how some of these games went, Jen? I question our ability to do some of these games.
Oh, one of these games just actually, I'm like, I can't handle it. It fills me with anxiety. We're not ever doing it.
Reading about it makes Jen anxious. She's like texting me about it. But this one actually is super easy. First, there was a competition to see who could drink a pitcher of wine the fastest. So that's super basic. The rules are not hard. They're good for drunk people. Just drink this one the fastest.
Great for me.
Was the wine watered? Did it have honey or pine resin in it? We don't know. The sources don't say. We just know that the winner would receive a small oiled wineskin as a trophy. And this trophy also was probably filled with wine. I mean, this just reminds me, Jen, of when you're in a hot dog eating competition and you win and the reward is more hot dogs.
I mean, I have never heard of someone who won a hot dog eating competition and then won more hot dogs. If the prize in a hot dog eating competition is more hot dogs, you better like hot dogs, because I can't think of anything I'd want to eat less than more hot dogs.
After a situation where you have to pound like 100 hot dogs in like 10 minutes or something, I'd be like, I am not having any more hot dogs.
Can you even pound 100 hot dogs in 10 minutes? That feels like a lot.
I don't know. I've never tried it.
Did you eat the bun too? Oh, no. Moving on.
So we're going to move on to this drinking game that causes Jen massive amounts of anxiety. It's called Kottabos. And this is a strange and messy game that involved flinging wine all over the place, which makes Jen extremely anxious. So much to clean up.
It could get everywhere. And I'm a renter. Just flinging wine all over the place. Like, you know that the people playing the game weren't thinking like, oh, Jen's going to have to clean this up. But Jen is thinking, oh, as a woman, I would have to clean this mess up and it makes me angry.
Okay, so Jen is really pissed off about this game, but we're going to tell you what it was because it's actually like, it sounds really hard too.
So this was a game played mostly by men, and Kottabos was played in a circle with the participants reclining on sofas and presumably getting drunk. The participants would fling the remains of their drinking cup in a particular way that was supposed to not break up the passage of wine through the air as it was hurled in the direction of a lampstand.
The dregs of the wine, so like I guess the pieces of grape or whatever at the bottom of your wine cup, you're supposed to hurl that in such a way that it makes a perfect arc.
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever been in like a fight where you're outside in the summer with a hose and you sort of like arc the hose up to fling the water at someone. And you can see it just kind of going in like a perfect sort of way where it doesn't all break up.
Right. So you're supposed to make a perfect arc with your wine that you're flinging.
Yes. So you're flinging it at a lampstand. And on this lampstand, there would be a tiny statue at the top with its arms outstretched, like, please, please, I just want wine. And on top of its arms would be a small disc called a plastinix. And about halfway down on the stand was another larger disc, and it was called the manes. The point of this game was to throw the wine in such a way that it knocked the plastinix off the tiny statue. And then this tiny disc fell and clanked into the manes. And this would make the sound like a bell, praise Dio. And the game would be won. And, you know, the Jen person would be just looking at you like, I'm going to kill you all.
Okay, let me break this down.
I could see us playing this game maybe like around a pool or a lake where you can kind of get messed somewhere, but...
Yeah, I have to break this down because number one, you're not supposed to fling your cup at the plastics or whatever it is. You're supposed to fling your wine at it and knock it down with your wine while making sure that the wine stays in a perfect arc and that the disc falls in such a way that it hits this other disc halfway down and makes a bell sound. You can't sit up.
No, you got to be laying down.
You have to be reclining gracefully on your couch while you do it. If you sit up, it doesn't count. And there's like a bunch of you. Remember, the ideal number of an ancient Greek drinking party was 9. So there might be 9 people on these reclining couches flinging their wine everywhere and getting it all over the walls and all over the floor and all over each other. And some of them maybe hit the lampstand, but probably the majority do not. This is a really messy ass fucking game.
So it's important to note that a lot of the time, people are depicted drinking wine wine from a kylix, which was a really shallow bowl. Sometimes it looks more like a plate, but with a raised stem at the bottom and 2 horizontal handles at the sides. You can put a picture of this in the show notes.
It looks like it'd be really easy to spill.
Oh God, yeah. It's like there's like big martini or like margarita glasses with the wide brim where I'm like, could you put this not in this glass for me, please? I'm gonna have it down my front.
You're watering the boobs, Jen.
Girls need libations. So anyway, the name kylix is where the English word chalice comes from, by way of the Latin word calyx.
After a day of penis parades, animal sacrifices, dancing, and then a night of very messy drinking games, the next morning, or we're probably actually, who are we kidding, afternoon, everyone's fucking hungover as shit. It was time for the main event of the Dionysia, the play competitions. And this is actually really significant because so many of the really famous ancient Greek tragedies that we have that have come down to us today were originally written for the great city Dionysia play competitions around the 6th century BC. Playwrights like Euripides and Sophocles and Aristophanes and Aeschylus, like all the really big names, right, Jen?
Mm-hmm.
And this was one of the few times that everyone was allowed into the theater. Men and women, the enslaved people, and the citizens, everyone was equal. Seats were on a first-come, first-served basis, with men and women able to attend and take part in watching the celebrations. People would camp outside the theater the night before to ensure good seats. Before we talk about the plays that were performed, I need to take you on a really, really fun little sidebar here into the history of Greek tragedy and the goat song.
Yes.
This blew my mind, the goat song.
So when I write these episodes, I will frequently text Jenny, or I have a WhatsApp group of a couple friends and Jenny, different random facts I found out. So like I literally just texted Jenny.
She live tweets her research and it is like, it keeps me going, Jen. It makes my life worth living. It's like my favorite thing ever because so many things that Jen texts me like blow my mind and this is one of them.
As soon as I found it, I was like, but the goat song, Jenny. And later on this season, the wild ponies and the shepherds. But we're not there yet.
Oh God, the shepherds, the ponies. You're going to get it once we have the entire arc up. We're not going to explain it now. So
don't worry, you can look back on this and be like, yes.
Right. It's a little Easter egg for people in the future. So this is a quote from an article by Jennifer Pogue called The Cult of Dionysus. Quote, at the annual Dionysia, the goat song was also performed. The goat song, according to Jennifer Pogue, gave birth to Greek drama. Originally, a song or hymn was sung as a goat was being sacrificed to Dionysus. The song often addressed questions that were arising about divine law, judgment, and various social conflicts of general concern. So this was like an airing of the grievances, right, Jen?
Yeah, it's like Festivus for the rest of us. This is essentially the point in time where they decided to air their grievances.
In song form while a goat was being sacrificed.
And they were like, why? Why gods are at war at Sparta? They're so hardcore. They cut their nipples off. Why do they want our nipples?
Why, God, why? Why are the Spartans coming for our nipples? Why?
Granted, they did not cut their nipples off or go for the Athenians' nipples, but wouldn't it be funny if they did?
Can we prove that they didn't?
I mean, I'm sure there are many historians who probably would challenge us on this, but I've had a very large glass of wine and it sounded funny.
I'm totally going with this whole nipple situation.
But I mean, essentially, this was the time at which you would call upon the gods and say, why have all of our crops been eaten by beetles? And why has the wine failed? And why
are we all cursed with boils? Yeah.
And why can't our women get pregnant? Or why have our men been at war for 10 years at Troy? Which, yes, I know was not a real war, but, let's pretend it was.
Siege of Milos. Why?
That's kind of the questions they were asking.
So, the goat song was basically this sort of public airing of the grievances, as it were.
So now we're going to dive back into the quote, because it's a really good quote.
Right, so we're going back to Jennifer Pogue here. She has more to add. Quote, the goat song was seen as something of a group discussion or address of common concerns, and as a way for people collectively and individually to purify their minds, like we said, airing of the grievances. The hymn then became a performance piece sung by a chorus. The performance evolved over time to include first a monologue, and then with the addition of a second voice, a dialogue. Eventually, more voices were added, and the performance of the goat song became the tragic drama that we have come to associate with the great Greek tragedians Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. In fact, the Greek word tragedia, from which we get our word tragedy, literally translates as the song of a male goat. Put that in your pipe and smoke it, people. Every time you say the word tragedy, it means I'm just so excited about this. The Greeks truly loved drama because they felt that the gods were speaking to them and judging their piety rather than merely being annoyed by them.
So I wanted to include this quote, even though it's a rather long one, because it explains what the ancient Greeks were trying to achieve with this festival. The goal of these plays was a sort of group catharsis, a moment where everyone involved, from the performers to the audience, will be able to watch their fears and their hopes and their desires played out before them, often with tragic consequences, because tragedy.
Because Song of a Male Goat, that's why.
It doesn't end well for that male goat, that's all I'm going to say.
That's why it's a tragedy, Jen.
Exactly. And the idea was to invoke this unified moment of release, of understanding, of pain or sadness or joy. And that was the aim of tragedy and the point of the festival, to bring people together and unify them with their God through the release of an emotion, a reminder of their role in the world, often small and humble before the mighty gods, because when you think about the great Greek tragedies, a lot of times they're about hubris and men getting this idea that they're above themselves.
It actually does really make sense, because if the origin of tragedy as a concept of Western theater is this sort of airing of communal pain that has to do with this hymn, with this religious sacrifice, with the death of an animal. You're talking to the gods about why your community is suffering. And of course, there are no answers to that because we don't get answers to why something terrible happens. It's just life. It's like a sense of sort of group communal powerlessness and a way of sort of explaining why horrible things happen.
Well, yeah. And when you look at things like hubris and the great Greek tragedies like Oedipus, Oedipus, his city is being besieged with illness and plague. And he's like, what's bringing that on? And everyone are like, you sure you want to know the answer? He's like, can't be anything to do with me. I'm the best. I got rid of the Sphinx. And then it's like, well, you fucked your mom and killed your father. So it's kind of your fault.
You went ahead and kept it in the family, Oedipus.
Yeah. The only way this will stop is if you just, get out of your city. And that's what you're getting at. Think about Antigone, where, the conflict is the state versus the individual's belief. And, in the end, the state loses and the individual's belief triumphs, but they all die anyway. So it's just misery.
So what's so interesting about this concept of catharsis, right? This communal emotional release, is that this is actually physiologically what happens. A 2017 study from Princeton University monitored heart rates and electrodermal activity in 12 audience members watching the musical Dreamgirls in a West End theater in London. The researchers found that the audience members' heartbeats synchronized at emotional moments throughout the play, increasing and decreasing at the same rates and at the same times. Theater really is an emotionally unifying event. One of the researchers, Dr. Joe Devlin, was quoted as saying, quote, "Experiencing the live theater performance was extraordinary enough to overcome group differences and produce a common physiological experience in the audience members."
I want to talk for a minute about one of the most incredible live theater performances I've ever seen. I've seen it twice. I've seen Medea. I've seen 2 different productions of it. If you don't know the story, Medea is Jason of Jason and the Argonauts' fame wife. She runs away with him. She helps him succeed in his quest, and then she marries him. She leaves her homeland, burns all of her bridges. She kills her brother, pisses off her father. Everything you could do to be like, I can never go back. And does all of this for her love of Jason. And she follows him to this new country and has 2 boys with him, and all of a sudden Jason finds himself a younger model.
Fuck that dude.
Medea has no power in this situation. She went from being a princess to being this foreigner who's looked on with distrust, and she has one last card she can play, and she sets out down a horrible path that includes killing his bride, killing the king, and eventually slaughtering her sons. And I knew the myth, so I knew what was going to happen. But so many people in the theater didn't know. It was staged differently each time. And each time you could feel the collective intake of breath of, what's going to happen?
And what's so fascinating about that is this is a play that's thousands of years old. And throughout the staging of this play, from its earliest inception, audiences have had the same reaction. So by watching a play like that, it's almost like your heart is beating in time with the heartbeats of these ancient audience members all the way back through time.
Absolutely. And the 2 productions I saw, the real violence in the tradition of Greek theater is kept off stage. So what you get is the aftermath. And it was heartbreaking because you know what's happening. You don't have to see what's happening to have that emotional reaction to it.
It's super interesting, too, because if you think about the original audiences that these plays were written for, they're probably so familiar with violence in their everyday lives that they didn't need to see it staged to have that feeling.
No. And, when you think about something like Medea, you are sitting in the amphitheater where you're surrounded by men and women, and there's this terrifying feeling of like, a lot of times for women, like, what if that is the only option? And a lot of times for men, like, what if my wife did something like that?
Because sometimes women, in this horrifically patriarchal society, were pushed into really extreme circumstances, and that's another thing.
So during the festival, 3 tragedies were staged and 1 satyr play, or a body comedy. Remember our satyrs from the last episode with their permanent erections and their kind of fun times in Dionysus's entourage. So actors wore masks to hide their identity and allow themselves to fully become another person. And the ancients really believed that you put on this mask and you were no longer Jen McManamy or Jenny Williamson. You were now Oedipus or Medea or whoever. So only men were allowed to act in plays. So this meant that all the roles written for women were performed by men in masks wearing women's clothing. All plays had a chorus who kind of stood in for the audience. They were often the moral sounding board of the performance and had a lot more information than the characters on stage. The poet or playwright would also often take part in the performance. Let's pause for a minute to paint a picture of the scene. The theater is filled with excited patrons, people who've been hanging out all night and drinking to get into this. Everyone is in a great party mood. The stage is set. The story would be something familiar, some old tale that everyone knew, but with, a fresh take, something contemporary. It'd be something like Oedipus or Medea or the Bacchae or the Trojan women. These were all ancient stories and folktales that had been around long before they were adapted into plays. Shakespeare did the same thing with his plays because we know a lot of them were based on older mythology and stories.
Yeah, he was basically just reprising a technique that went all the way back to the great city Dionysus.
We read a massive chunk of the death scene of Antony and Cleopatra in our last episode last season.
And that was a Shakespeare play, and was mine from Plutarch.
So women and men were able to watch the show together. They would be drinking and snacking. I'm sure there were snacks.
Gotta be snacks.
Gotta be snacks with all the wine. Foreigners would be dressed in red because vampires. And then the show would start. The chorus would shuffle onto stage in a dizzying array of masks, and the tale would begin. The ultimate aim of the tragedian was to make the audience feel something. It was to elicit a response from the crowd, which was supposed to allow the audience to have this huge emotional breakthrough, a communion with the divine. And one of the things, like the word enthusiasm, to be enthusiastic is to be imbued, like communing with the God, to have the God inside of you. That's what enthusiasm means.
Interesting.
So after all this womanly emotion, which is what they associated with tragedies, a satyr play was staged so that the audience could laugh and clear their head with this male ribald humor.
The emotions elicited in a tragic play were coded as feminine.
Yeah, because, there's something in my eye.
Dudes are not supposed to have feelings like that.
Some of the plays that would have been performed, like Medea or the Trojan woman, or even the Bacchae, would have these characters who you're not necessarily supposed to feel sorry for. Like, Medea is a witch and a foreigner, and she knew what she was getting into when she ran away with Jason. And Jason was only trying to have a better life for their children together. And why could she not understand that this was the right course of action?
It seems so clear to us, to me and Jen, looking at this from a modern Western feminist lens, who to root for.
As someone with ovaries who could have been put in that situation, it's really easy for me who to root for. And a lot of times when I was younger, I rooted for Medea up until she killed her children. And now, as I'm older, obviously I'm not rooting for her to kill her children, but I understand.
Right.
And I feel like if you're a man watching this performed, you might feel sympathy for Medea, and you might feel like, why do I feel sympathy for someone who's just murdered her children? This doesn't make any logical sense to me.
The real culprit here is the brutal patriarchy that takes all power from women. It's a play that is designed to create uncomfortable feelings in the patriarchy. In the specific individual men in the audience who are sitting next to women in the audience for the first time all year, because this is the only time, as far as I know, that this is allowed to happen, really forcing them to look at one of the most extreme actions a woman can take from a woman's point of view and being drawn along the road towards seeing how that could come to pass. And I actually think that that is extremely subversive for this time period.
Absolutely. And laying it out as like a natural course of action as opposed to something that reeks of just a woman being hysterical. So the festival was also subversive. It was a way for poets and playwrights to protest the unfairness of their society. We just talked about that in Medea. And I also want to harken back to what we talked about in How to Survive a Siege Part 2.
This is the second episode we ever did. Jen's going all the way back here.
All the way back to our roots when I was like, Jenny, I want to do a podcast so I can talk all about Greek theater of protest. And Jenny was like, just write an episode and I'll let you do whatever you want. And I was like, ha ha ha.
Jen had her own section in this, which was about the play The Trojan Women.
The Trojan Women is one of my favorite plays and possibly my favorite Greek tragedy.
That was the only episode we recorded at 2 different times. It sounds like 2 different people talking when we get to certain sections, and that's why. It sounds like we were underwater. Like the sound on How to Survive a Siege Part 2 is just a tad wonky.
It is. We apologize for that. But I'm going to recap now. The Trojan Women is an epic anti-war story, and it's all about the aftermath and the human cost of what happens to a city after it's been sacked, particularly what happens to the women and children who have survived. This play was written in direct response to something that actually occurred in Greek history, the siege and capture of Milos in 415 BC. And I include this play because one of the most heartbreaking moments of the play is the very end. I'm giving you a spoiler, but it's thousands of years old, so, where Hector's son is ripped from his mother's arms, his crying, sobbing mother who's about to be taken into slavery as a concubine of someone who killed her husband. And they fling the baby from the walls of Troy. And you have this horrible moment. You can feel how it would sound in the theater. And I think the thing to me that always catches in the back of my throat about this when I talk about it is the men might have come back from that war having done actions similar to this. The siege had just happened and there were a lot of Athenians who were not happy with what had happened. And this was put on to say this is what happens to people after a siege. This is what we have done. We think it's barbarous that the Trojans have done it, but we're the same.
So, plays like Medea and the Bacchae both empowered and othered women. They allowed the patriarchal ancient Greeks a moment of fear and awe when faced with the rage and power of women, the power to destroy, the power to lose themselves in the divine madness of the gods, the power to throw off the shackles of their station and subvert everything in society. When viewed this way, these plays must have been deeply uncomfortable to watch for the men in the audience and also terrifying. And I don't think any of these plays ever won first place. We're also including the Bacchae here, which we talked about in the last episode, which was about Dionysus and the Maenads ripping Pentheus to shreds. So the Dionysia were a contest. Sometimes you put on shows knowing you weren't going to win, but you wanted to make your point.
So Jenny, I know you're asking yourself, but where for the love of Dionysus are the orgies?
It's like you're in my brain, Jen.
I know this is the god of wine and ritual madness, and all we've talked about is theater, penis parades, and drinking games.
Well, look, those things are great, too. I'm happy to hear about those.
So we're going to get to the orgies, but before we can get to them, I'm really sorry. We got to take this left turn.
Right, so those of us who are listening who just want to hear about the orgies, we're getting to it, but not quite yet.
So now we're moving into a different direction, and we're going to look at the Orphic Mysteries. The Orphic Mysteries were a set of religious rituals and beliefs that were practiced among the ancient Greeks and Thracians. Their founding figure was the mythical Orpheus, but the god they worshipped was Dionysus.
Poetry mentioning the Orphic beliefs can be traced back to the 6th and 5th centuries BC. These beliefs are actually different from what we normally associate with Dionysus and what we talked about so far. These stories have to do with death, rebirth, and the afterlife. So here's where we start talking about rebirth. These beliefs are different from the catharsis of theater or the freedom of wearing masks or the goat song. This has to do with the immortal soul.
Bah.
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 Bah. It actually feels a lot more like the
Bah.
Stop it! How am I going to get through this paragraph? And the episode devolves into 45 minutes of Jen and me making goat noises. And we're done. I feel like I'm a sick goat. That's why it's tragic. Okay.
Guys, I am on a very large glass of wine.
And she also took some pretty strong painkillers.
Oh, yeah, because I messed my back up, guys.
She was a trooper. I was like, do you want to record on a different day? And she's like, no.
I was like, no, I need to finally order a heating pad for my back.
My back.
Back.
What the fuck is this? I'm talking about our immortal soul.
I'm talking about my back, my very mortal back.
Back. Trying to get through this paragraph about Dionysus and your immortal soul. It actually feels a lot more like the mythology of a certain modern religion, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Christianity. The Orphic Mysteries, moving on.
Guys, this will be the only other episode where the sound sounds unequal because Jenny and I got too trash to finish it. It was a close call with Yule, but this will be the one that breaks us. Praise Dionysus.
Praise Dio! The Orphic Mysteries. The Orphic Mysteries were incredibly secretive rites, and it's possible that they began their life in Thrace. Because as we talked about in our last episode, Orpheus was a demigod and beloved son of Thrace. And we do mean that Orpheus, you guys, the guy who descended into the underworld and came out on the other side as kind of a bucket of ball sweat, let's just say.
It was just the undercarriage sweat.
Ew.
He went down there for true love and came out being like, there's no such thing as true love, and women, you don't need to worship this god this way. You should just be not like this.
A steaming jar of underball smegma. That's what he came out as.
Toe cheese.
Ew. So, just as a recap, Orpheus was a famous musician in Greek mythology, son of the muse Calliope and the king of Thrace. He was taught to play the lyre by the god Apollo, and perhaps the most well-known myth about him is the one where his wife Eurydice dies, and he follows her into the underworld, and he plays the lyre for Hades, king of the underworld, and Hades decides to let Eurydice travel back to the world of the living with him. But only if he doesn't turn around and look at her while they travel back together. And Orpheus had one job, and he totally fucked it up, drops the ball on this, and turns around to look at his wife, and turns out she has to stay dead. Oops.
There are other versions where Hades literally sets people out in the shadows to sort of whisper to Orpheus and be like, she's not there. It's all a trick. Just really to play like psychologically to like tease him and things like that. Or it's a monster following you into the light. It's not Eurydice. To tempt him into turning around. And I suspect this is Orphic rewriting of this myth to make Orpheus seem less of a dick.
I mean, Orpheus had one job, Jen.
He literally had one job. Don't turn around until you and her are all the way out in the daylight. And you know what? He turned around. He did. Sorry, Orpheus. Whether you were being manipulated or not, you turned around. But I can see the Orphics twisting it so that this prophet of theirs comes out not looking so bad and had a bum deal. So, according to the stories behind the Orphic Mysteries, that experience coming back from the underworld changed Orpheus, and not for the better, as we talked about last week. After he returned to the living world, he wandered around preaching about how we all need to just be a lot dour, less sexually free, and women should definitely not be tearing you apart or engaging in orgiastic celebrations a la the old world Dionysus. He particularly targeted Dionysus, who was the god of wine and revelry, and who was worshipped by wild, free women, particularly in Thrace. And in our last episode, we told you what happened to Orpheus. Ultimately, he got torn limb from limb by Maenads, but his head survived and still kept spewing bullshit.
His head continued to exist and continued to judge your life choices.
Absolutely, which we're not down with, Orpheus.
Right. Negative commentary on all your life choices. Thanks, severed head of Orpheus. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Orph. We appreciate what you were going for, but...
Bah.
In our last episode, we also told you one of Dionysus's origin stories, the one where he was conceived as a love child between Zeus and the mortal princess Semele, and later ripped from her womb and impregnated into Zeus's thigh, and by thigh we mean testicles, and Dionysus was ripped from her womb because Zeus literally burned her to a crisp. The Orphic Mysteries had a different origin story for Dionysus, one that centered on him being a sacrificial king who was killed and reborn to save sinful humanity. Because Orpheus thinks humanity is sinful, and you know, Orpheus must know a thing or two because he came back from the underworld to spew bullshit. In Orpheus's teachings, Dionysus's origin mythology goes like this. Dionysus was the child of Zeus and Persephone. And let's pause for a minute because this union is just, it breaks my brain.
So this entire story is going to break your brain. Just a heads up.
Here's what you want. You want like a proof style, clear window at night so you can write on it in Sharpie and figure out what we're talking about here. You need a blackboard or like a whiteboard.
Some kind of a board.
Some kind of a board or tablet, maybe a piece of paper. You're going to have to do some drawing.
You're going to have to make a flow chart to understand what we're about to tell you.
So first, Persephone is Zeus's daughter. So this would make Jenny, Persephone, Dionysus's mother, and also his sister.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, you following?
I'm following.
And that also makes Zeus Dionysus's father and his grandfather.
It's looking very Ptolemaic at the moment.
The Ptolemaics would be like, really?
They'd be like, yeah, this sounds like a typical family.
Sounds like you're going to have epic family reunions.
Pass the fucking potatoes.
So in this story, Hera, who's Zeus's wife and the goddess of fidelity and marriage.
Oh, is she also his sister?
She was also his sister. Do you know what? Persephone's mother is also Zeus's sister.
Great times.
Anyway, so Hera is so not thrilled that Zeus boned his daughter by his other sister. He also decided that his child with Persephone would be his successor rather than, his kids with Hera. And we don't exactly know why an immortal god needs a successor, but Zeus felt he did. But anyway, Hera is so pissed off that she calls on her mates, the Titans, and tells them that she's got a little side hustle for them. Could they, I don't know, just pull apart a tiny baby? Like, just rip him limb from limb?
Here we get back into the limb ripping here.
Listen, if we're not ripping limbs, are we telling a story about Dionysus?
We're not, so I'm really glad we shoehorned it in.
So the Titans decide they're going to take this freelance contract. They get the money up front. And the Titans kidnap Dionysus and rip him apart. And just for grins and giggles, they decide they're going to eat the baby Dionysus. I don't know why.
Spread him on toast.
Put him on toast. He's like Marmite or jam.
That's right.
So they eat every part of him except for his heart, which is saved by the goddess Athena. And the plot holes here make me angry because if you could save his heart, why didn't you save the baby?
So the myths differ here. In some versions, the heart is then sewn into Zeus's thigh, by which we mean ball sack.
If we say Zeus's thigh, we absolutely mean his balls.
If we just say thigh, it's probably more than a 50-50 chance we're talking about testicles. So
bollocks. We're talking about bollocks. That's like my favorite British word.
Things Jen loves.
It's better than ballsack.
Is it? I don't know. I see them as equal.
UK listeners, definitely come to my defense here. Bollocks is better than ballsack.
This isn't a hill I'm prepared to die on. I don't have strong feelings. I think they're both fine.
Oh, I am. I am 2 big glasses of wine in. I am prepared to die on the bollocks hill.
All right, Jen, I'm going to leave you on the hill and I'm going to move on with this paragraph. So anyway, in some versions, the heart is then sewn into Zeus's thigh, by which we definitely mean ball sack, or if you're in the UK, bollocks. And in others, it was implanted into Semele, Dionysus' mortal mother. So Semele and Zeus's testicles both make an appearance in this story as well.
Well, Semele doesn't have testicles.
No, Zeus has testicles, though.
Yeah, but you said Semele and Zeus's testicles make an appearance.
Semele's uterus and Zeus's testicles. How about that's what I mean? Okay.
Correct.
In revenge, Zeus smote the Titans with a thunderbolt because no one got away with eating and dismembering his heir, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, good. I'm glad he put his foot down there.
Gotta draw the line somewhere. Boundaries. So, like I said, in revenge, Zeus smote the Titans with a thunderbolt because boundaries and blasted them into soot. And Apollo gathered up all the pieces of Dionysus except the heart and buried them at Delphi, even though all the pieces of Dionysus except the heart had been previously eaten by the Titans. I don't know. It's a plot hole. The wizard did it.
A vampire's responsible.
It's outside the timeline. Anyway, it's also, this might be, indicative of a link.
There was a belief that in the winter months, the Oracle of Delphi was sacred also to Dionysus, who might have been giving out prophecies at that point in time.
We're moving back to this myth that we're trying to get through. So
we're never getting through it.
We're just giving you guys a goat song. Fuck it. Somehow, from these heart impregnations, Dionysus is born again, but he remembers the fact that he was dead for a short time before his heart was impregnated in either Semele or Zeus. So, after his heart gestates and he's reborn from Zeus or Semele, Dionysus descends into the underworld where he's dead for a short time, mimicking the seasons and the death or hibernation of the grapevine. Some versions say he went down there to rescue his mom from death.
Yeah, potentially he goes down into the underworld, rescues his mom Semele from death, and is like, that's my mom. I'm a god. Can't we do something better for her than making her just die and be with all you ghosty people? And they're like, sure. And in those versions, Semele becomes a goddess, I feel like, of a star or a moon.
So the whole point is that Dionysus, for whatever reason, goes down into the underworld and mimics the life cycle of the grapevine.
And I have a theory about that goes back to the idea that Dionysus becomes the male version of the Elysian Mysteries, and we will talk about the Elysian Mysteries. But essentially, the Elysian Mysteries are dedicated to Persephone Persephone and Demeter, and they mimic the life cycles. But by throwing Dionysus in here, you've got a very male-centric focus on it, which then goes into Christianity.
Right, and we're getting to that. So he was reborn in the spring, according to the Orphic Mysteries, when the world woke up. The ivy, which blooms in the winter, was the promise he would return. Dionysus became an early sacrificial king with ceremonies to honor his death at the hands of the Titans, simulated with grapes and wine, and his eventual rebirth in the spring. In this mythology, Dionysus also becomes a god of the underworld. And Jen and I, just when we saw all of this, and I realize we're going on so many tangents here and trying to tell you guys this myth, and that's because there are so many roots to other things that we can see in it. And one of the things that we can see here is the connection to Osiris, the Egyptian god, who also gets torn limb from limb and is then brought back to life. And it's just indicative of the journey that the myth of Dionysus might have taken through Egypt, among other places.
And I think the other thing about Osiris that I wanted to talk about is Osiris becomes a god of the underworld. He becomes essentially the Egyptian Hades figure. And the thing about Dionysus is he kind of went everywhere. You know, he was in India, he was in Africa, he was in the Mediterranean, he was in Thrace, which is southern Europe, he was in Crete, he was all over the place. He followed these like ancient trails of wine, and he kind of does a little bit of cultural appropriation in this mythology. We're going to get into it, but there's also this idea of reincarnation, which is very much comes from the Hindu beliefs that you don't necessarily see in classical Greek beliefs, but you see in the Orphic beliefs, which I feel like take on all of these big things from these other religions Dionysus interacted with. And there is a whole theory of research about Dionysus and Osiris, and I didn't go down that route because it's too much, but I do want to make sure that we mention it.
Yeah, and we're going to get into the reincarnation stuff in a second.
So, Jenny, now I want to talk about what happened to those Titans. Zeus blasted them so hard that all that remained was a big pile of blackened soot. And in the Orphic religion, the soot of the Titans was the dirt from which sinful mankind was born. And the remains of Dionysus, mixed in with the soot, are the immortal souls of all mankind. The immortal soul was a gift from Dionysus, and in order for humans to free their soul from the bondage of the Titan's soot or sin and purify them for the afterlife, humans had to be reborn 10 times.
We're seeing a concept of sin, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, and I will say that this concept of sin predates Christianity. So the Orphic mysteries were so secretive that we don't know a lot about them. We do know that they had burial rites, which included mysterious inscriptions like life, death, life, truth, Dionysus, Orpheus. I don't know why they needed life twice. Maybe because they come back to life after death. That's my guess. We don't know what these tablets meant exactly, but we do know that they were found with the bodies of the Orphic worshippers. Orphic disciples were also buried with gold leaf tablets that contained instructions for how to survive in the underworld, including things like don't drink from the river Lethe or the river of forgetfulness, and instructions for being released from the underworld by telling dread Persephone, queen of the underworld, that her son Dionysus has released them because they were a follower of his.
That is so ancient Egyptian, right? Like having a book that tells you how to survive in the afterlife.
And that's why I wanted to stop for a minute, because this is that idea of the Egyptian religion and the Greek religion, melding, that is so crucial to the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and this idea of how you survive and that how you're buried is very important and what it means. That's not to say the Greeks didn't have their own burial rites, because they did, and that those burial rites weren't really important and observed, because they were. But this idea that we're seeing here is quite different from what we usually see in classical mythology, which is you get to the river Styx, the ferryman takes you across, and then you go on to your next path. Here we're seeing how you can beat death and come back.
And it also ties into the Orphic mysteries, because Orpheus did beat death and come back. He went to the underworld and then came back. And then so did Dionysus. So you can kind of see why those two figures are tied in together.
So much of the Orphic religion is lost to us. We don't know what their secret rites were like. We don't know who was invited into the cult. Given Orpheus's newfound distaste for women, it's probable that the cult was run by men. I could be wrong. Some writers have referred to orgies.
Woohoo!
But we don't know much about them. Sorry, Jenny. It's believed that if there were orgies, the purpose of these were orgiastic rituals to call Dionysus back from the dead.
What exactly did these rituals and orgies look like? We don't know. As we've said before, a lot about the Orphic mysteries hasn't come down to us. That's fine. Just don't tell us the dirty details. That's fine. It's not like anyone's dying to know over here in the 21st century. But what did last into the present day are the Orphic hymns, which are a collection of religious poems from around the 3rd century BC, much later than the great city Dionysia. About 300 years later, right, Jen?
Mm-hmm.
We've included a short poem from the Orphic hymns so you can see how this religion was codified. Jen, are you ready for this?
I want to do a call and answer.
Okay, let's do the call and answer. And this uses the Roman word for Dionysus, which is Bacchus. So we're going to be saying Bacchus a lot.
Yeah, we're actually going to use all the Roman deities. So we'll say Bacchus, we'll say Proserpina, who is Persephone, we'll say Jove or Jupiter, who's Zeus.
Okay, so let's do this. Jen, you ready?
I'm so ready.
Bacchus, I call, loud sounding and divine, fanatic God, a twofold shape is thine.
Thy various names and attributes I sing, O firstborn, thrice begotten, Bacchic king.
Rural, ineffable, two-formed, obscure, two-horned, with ivy crowned, Euion, pure. Euion.
Euion.
We don't know what that means.
Bullface and martial, bearer of the vine, endowed with counsel prudent, Ebolius and divine.
Eubolius? This is a wacky translation. We're trying to keep in this mood.
It's a wacky translation. We're trying to give it to you, but we've also had wine. I mean, Bacchus would approve.
Triennial, whom the leaves of vines adorn, of Jove and Proserpine, occultly born.
Immortal Damon, hear my suppliant voice. Give me in blameless plenty to rejoice.
And listen, gracious, to my mystic prayer, surrounded with thy choir of nurses fair.
I put this in for a few reasons. The first was the triennial. If you think about triennial, it's sort of like 3 sides. It's talking about the vines, like ivy is a 3-sided vine, isn't it?
I don't know, is it?
Yeah, the leaves are 3-sided. Think about poison ivy. I mean, as the Simpsons would say, leaves of 3, let them be. Leaves of 4, eat some more. And then the other thing that we caught when we were in rehearsal, which is the thing that makes it really worth including this, is give me in blameless plenty to rejoice.
Yeah, so that is such a cool line. It really stood out for me, and I was talking to Jen about how different mythic stories I've encountered in my life, and I don't know, maybe this sort of subconscious thing is that when you get plenty, there's a cost to it. There's no such thing as a free windfall. There's no such thing as a free lunch. There's always a karmic cost. And this idea of asking for blameless plenty just really struck me.
Yeah, we were looking at it and I felt quite emotional about it, to be honest with you. This idea of asking your God for blameless plenty. Give me abundance. Give me things to rejoice, but please don't put a catch on it. Please just let me feel that joy and that happiness without any strings attached.
And that's a little bit anti-Dionysus in a way, because so many times we see Dionysus in the mythology giving people gifts that have a massive catch, like the golden touch to Midas, for example.
Sure, and that's why, to me, it's really important that you're saying this in your prayers. If you knew that Dionysus gave Midas the golden touch, which we'll have a Patreon episode about that, if you knew he did that, then you're also oh boy, if you're going to give me a present, please don't have anything like the golden touch attached to it.
Please just give me blameless plenty and not plenty with a giant catch. Dionysus is one of those gods you have to specify that with.
Dionysus is a fertility god, and he's a god of the harvest. So you can see people in rural areas and people who are very dependent on a harvest saying these prayers and being please give me the plenty. Please give me the things that I need to survive. And don't give me a catch. Don't give me an amazing harvest and kill my son at war.
So the other interesting thing about this prayer is that you actually can kind of see that it's starting to feel a little bit like modern prayers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Another lasting legacy of the Orphic cult. It bridged the gap between ancient polytheistic religions and modern Christianity. We have encountered in our research a lot of historians holding up the Orphic mysteries as kind of a stepping stone between older polytheistic traditions and Christianity. Because although there wasn't a holy book in the Orphic mysteries, we're starting to see this codified system where what you do in this life affects what happens to you in the next life. And that's not original to the Orphic mysteries either, there's the Hindu concept of karma, for example. And Hinduism is another thing that we see a little bit of influence on the Orphic mysteries. as well, because there's also rebirth in the Orphic Mysteries, and there's also a sense that things that you do in this life affect what happens to you in the next life. And there's also, the Egyptians had this too. They had this concept of weighing the heart against a feather. And there's also the Egyptian concept of the underworld and ripping Osiris limb from limb and having a book that tells you what to do in the afterlife in order to navigate it. We're seeing influence here when we read about the Orphic Mysteries that has to do with Hinduism and Egyptian mythologies that were probably a lot older than Dionysian mythology, and that Dionysian worship brought with it to places like Greece and Rome, and then provided the stepping stone for a religion like Christianity.
Yeah, and I just had going through my brain an old song I used to sing in choir when I was younger. Something like, unless you eat of the vine of the Son of God, then you will live forever. And if you think about that, like Jesus is always, portrayed as the way and the truth and the light. You drink this wine, you eat of his body, then you will get to live immortally. And you see it a lot coming through here in the Orphics. And I'm not going to say that Christianity took this directly from the Orphics, but it did exist a long time before. This idea of a sacrificial king who gives up his body, who gives up himself, so your immortal soul may be able to achieve happiness in the next world.
I mean, it's also like the living vine is very Dionysian too. I mean, Dionysus was the original living vine.
Exactly. The Dionysian living vine, this idea of like God as sort of like the vine and the way and the fruit and all that kind of thing, goes right back to Dionysus. And it's not something I really recognized, even having grown up that way, until I started doing this research.
Yeah.
So we're getting back to the Orphic tradition. Essentially, in the Orphic tradition, if you live your 10 lives, because you have to have 10 lives, don't know why 10. If you live your 10 lives well and free yourself from sin, you get to go to the Elysian Fields, which is a precursor to the idea of heaven. The Elysian Fields were a place for the heroic and the virtuous dead in Greek mythology. But if you didn't live that virtuous life over the course of your 10 lives, you had to go to the underworld, and that was ruled by Hades, and you got judged, and you went in whatever direction you were going to go, but probably not a nice one, because the Greeks really didn't have this sort of codified version of hell. So it's also interesting to me that we have this idea of reincarnation that has to hint at Dionysus's Eastern wanderings, because I didn't see a lot about reincarnation as being something that we saw in classical Greek religion. Like, you died, you went to Hades, and that was it.
Yeah, this is a concept that seems to be coming from India, just on our best guess of this.
On our best guess. And we know that Dionysus was in India because that's in the mythology.
Right. And it's also in the story of how the cultivation of wine traveled throughout the world. So it all tracks.
So here's a quote from an article on classical wisdom called The Mysteries of the Orphics by John Mancini. Quote, Orphism's insistence on freeing the soul from physical bondage was also borrowed by Christianity. And in Orphism, we can find an origin of religious guilt and its resolution through purification rituals conducted by an elite few who claimed they could save people's souls, which profoundly influenced other similar religious priesthoods that came later. Plato may have thought the Orphics were swindlers, but they were very influential.
I love that part.
Me too! The Orphics' ultimate triumph was the concretizing of heaven and hell, of delineating good and evil, and putting the work of preparing the human soul for death into a fantastically detailed religious practice.
I mean, I just have to comment on how Plato may have thought the Orphics were swindlers. I looked into Plato and tried to find this quote. I didn't see it anywhere. I am very curious as to where in Plato this is. I'm sure there are people who know more about it than me. But apparently Plato thought the Orphics were just full of some bullshit.
Sure, and I took this article from Classical Wisdom. They are a really good resource if you want to find out more about the classical world. So I trust them, but I didn't track this down as much as Jenny did. And I do kind of think they were swindlers.
Listen, as a atheist, you know my feelings on this, Jen.
I mean, as someone who doesn't exactly know what she's doing most days, but grew up religious, I don't know what I'm talking about. So, that was Orphism, a worship of Dionysus that grew up a little after the main cult practices, and that started finding its way across Greece and Rome, a religion that was a precursor to Christianity, and that started to codify worship for the salvation of an eternal soul. And we can see in this religion that the path of wine collected, or appropriated, ideas from other religions and other areas of the ancient world, and started to lump them into this religion.
Kayak gets my flight, hotel, and rental car right, so I can tune out travel advice that's just plain wrong.
Bro, Skycoin. Way better than points.
Never
fly during a Scorpio full moon.
Just tell the manager you'll sue. Instant room upgrade.
Stop taking bad travel advice. Start comparing hundreds of sites with Kayak and get your trip right.
Bad advice? You talking to me?
Kayak. Got that right.
Eczema is unpredictable, but you can flare less with Ebglyss, a once-monthly treatment for moderate to severe eczema. After an initial 4-month or longer dosing phase, about 4 in 10 people taking Ebglyss achieved itch relief and clear or almost clear skin at 16 weeks. And most of those people maintain skin that's still more clear at 1 year with monthly dosing.
Ebglyss, lebrikizumab LBKZ, a 250 milligram per 2 milliliter injection, is a prescription medicine used to treat adults and children 12 years of age and older who weigh at least 88 pounds or 40 kilograms with moderate to severe eczema, also called atopic dermatitis, that is not well controlled with prescription therapies used on the skin or topicals, or who cannot use topical therapies. Ebglyss can be used with or without topical corticosteroids. Don't use if you're allergic to Ebglyss. Allergic reactions can occur that can be severe. Eye problems can occur. Tell your doctor if you have new or worsening eye problems. You should not receive a live vaccine when treated with Ebglyss. Before starting Ebglyss, tell your doctor if you have a parasitic infection.
Ask your doctor about Ebglyss and visit ebglyss.lilly.com or call 1-800-LILY-RX or 1-800-545-5979.
Are you really buying a car online on AutoTrader right now?
Really?
At a playground?
Yeah, really. Look at these listings from dealers.
Wow, your search can really get that specific.
Really?
And you just put in your info and boom, car's in your budget.
Mom needs a second, honey.
You can really have it delivered?
Really. Or I can pick it up at the dealership. Mom! 1 sec, sweetie. Mommy's buying a car.
Mommy, look! I think your kid is walking up the slide.
Kyle, again? Really?
AutoTrader. Buy your car online. Really?
So, and now, Jenny, and now, at last, we get to the orgies.
This is literally the only reason I'm here.
I know, and I've kept you here for a long time.
I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. I just want to hear about the wild sex.
It's time to talk about Dionysus' Roman counterpart, Bacchus, and the Bacchanals.
It's time. Bah. Bah. So, the Bacchic mysteries. It's just all goat sounds from here on out. Bah.
Bacchic mysteries.
Hope you enjoy. Sign up for our Patreon. Bah. I'm going to stop.
Please do.
The Bacchic mysteries were what the Romans called the worship of Dionysus. And as the sacred rites traveled up the boot of Italy and took root in Roman culture, shit took a dark turn, shall we say. So did you know, Jen, that the Roman Senate was so afraid of the Bacchic mysteries?
Bacchic mysteries.
The Bacchic mysteries. That it...
Stop.
I can't help it. It's just how it is, the history. It all goes back to the Yule goat, which would mean the goat song.
It does not go back to the Yule goat. This is completely different.
I don't know. Is one goat different from another goat?
It all goes back to the goat song, the song of tragedy.
The airing of the grievances. So... Anyway, Jen, did you know that the Roman Senate was so afraid of the Bacchic mysteries that in 186 BC, which was more than 300 years after the first city, Dionysia, they outlawed gatherings of Bacchic worshippers greater than 5 or more people?
Do you know what, Jenny? I did know because I wrote the episode.
I mean, you're the one who told me to read this that way, so I'm reading it. Did you know that they actually disbanded the state-run cult of Bacchus and refused to allow the religion to have a treasury? And if you remember, in our Saturnalia episode, all the religious cults had a treasury from which you could pay for their festivals, except Dionysus. He did not have a treasury.
Do you know why?
Why?
Because ain't no party like a Dionysus party.
Because a Dionysus party don't stop!
We're showing our age.
We're a couple of old goats. We're too old for the gorilla sack. So the worship of... It's all goat sounds from here on out.
No, this is the best part of the episode. I should have led with this part of the episode in the cold open.
It should have just been 3 solid minutes of you making goat sounds. Why didn't we think of that before? I don't know what that was. That was like do a better goat sound, Jen. Thank you. Okay. So the worship of Bacchus was a big deal, and it gave the Senate and the upper echelons of Rome fucking hemorrhoids. Like, this stressed these people out.
It gave them the real fears. It gave them the fears where you don't sleep at night.
It gave them the shits, okay?
There was, like, explosive diarrhea every time they heard the name Bacchus.
Right. And somebody had to clean that up, which really stresses Jen out.
Oh, I've covered my face with my hands. I can't.
First, to be initiated into the Bacchic rites, you had to be a woman. Yes, women led this cult, and they got to sneak off into the woods once a year, carrying torches to commune with the god through a heady mix of wine, dancing, cymbals clashing, noise, probably some recreational drugs, by which we mean definitely some recreational drugs, and some orgies. And because men heard about what was going on, they totally wanted in.
Okay, so I'm a South Park fan, and you know that because when we talked about Lepidus, I called him the Butters of the ancient world.
Apt comparison.
There's a great South Park episode where the men in the town decide that they're going to dress up like witches 1 week a year leading up to Halloween. And they're going to go up into the woods and they're going to smoke crack and drink Jack Daniels. And to me, that is like a kind of modern version of what was going down in the woods here, except men were doing it. But they were cross-dressing.
Yeah.
I have, issues with South Park in general, but I do think it's quite funny and it made me think of that.
So I'm going to hit you guys with a quote that's going to blow your mind, all right? According to A Dictionary of Greek and Roman Antiquities by William Smith, who was drawing from Livy and Plato, quote, the time of initiation lasted 10 days, during which a person was obliged to abstain from all sexual intercourse. On the 10th, he took a solemn meal, underwent a purification by water, and was led to the sanctuary or bacchanal. At first, only women were initiated, and the orgies were celebrated every year for 3 days. Matrons alternately performed the functions of priests. But Pecula Ania, a Campanian matron, pretending to act under the direct influence of Bacchus, changed the whole method of celebration. She admitted men to the initiation and transferred the solemnization, which had hitherto taken place during the daytime, to the night. Instead of 3 days in the year, she ordered that the Bacchanalia should be held during 5 days in every month. It was from the time that these orgies were carried on after this new plan that, according to the statement of an eyewitness, licentiousness and crimes of every description were committed.
Can I stop you for a minute? I want to talk about Campania. Campania was kind of the bread bowl of ancient Italy.
Well, I think it just meant the countryside, right?
Yeah, but particularly Campania, where it incorporated a lot of places like Capua and Pompeii. It was an area where they grew a lot of grain and a lot of food. This is where a lot of the food came from. So the idea that there was like this matron who came from Campania, who was sort of stirring up this Bacchic cult, really important for what's going to come in this upcoming arc.
I also think I want to mention something too that I just noticed. Pecula Ania was a priestess of Dionysus, a very influential priestess of Dionysus, and William Smith is describing her as pretending to act under the direct influence of Bacchus. My feeling on that is she would have been, like the high priestess of Dionysus, and she would have probably believed, and everyone around her would have believed, that she was in fact acting under the direct influence of Bacchus.
Absolutely.
So anyway, instead of 3 days in the year, she ordered that the Bacchanalia should be held during 5 days in every month. It was from the time that these orgies were carried on after this new plan that, according to the statement of an eyewitness, licentiousness and crimes of every description were committed. Men as well as women indulged in the most unnatural appetites, and those who attempted to stop or to oppose such odious proceedings fell as victims. It was, as Livy says, a principle of the society to hold every ordinance of God and nature in contempt. Men, as if seized by fits of madness and under great convulsions, gave oracles, and the matrons, dressed as Bacchae, with disheveled hair and burning torches in their hands, ran down to the Tiber and plunged their torches into the water. The torches, however, containing sulfur and chalk, were not extinguished.
Think about that for a minute. They plunged these burning torches into the Tiber, and they came out the other side, and they were still burning. The theater of that is just incredible.
It's kind of a really dramatic picture in my mind right now. These would have been, women with wild hair running down to the river and plunging these ever-burning torches into the water and pulling them out still on fire. Men who refused to take part in the crimes of these orgies were frequently thrown into dark caverns and dispatched, while the perpetrators declared that they had been carried off by the gods. Among the number of the members of these mysteries were, at the time when they were suppressed, persons of all classes, and during the last 2 years, nobody had been initiated initiated who was above the age of 20 years, as this age was thought the most fit for seduction and sensual pleasure.
Let's just pause for a minute and go over what we're being told here.
There's a lot to unpack.
First off, number one, this cult was run by women. Women made the rules.
And they weren't young women. They were older women. They're called matrons.
So these are women who were probably married or who were above the age of marriage. And these women were gracious enough to invite men into their orgies. They were like, I guess we'll take a D.
Right.
So something not in this quote and that I found in another source was that the men were not admitted into the cult over the age of 18.
For seduction and sensual pleasure, I guess.
I think the other thing that we're talking about here is the age of majority and the men who are admitted. They are young men. They are men who haven't yet come into their inheritance or necessarily their manhood. And that's really important because these are older women who have a lot of control over younger men. Some of these younger men are plebs, they're slaves, they're freedmen, but some of them are from the upper echelons.
Especially in ancient Greek and Roman history we've covered so far, there are so many examples of older men, like 40, 50-year-old men, taking control, sexual control, especially over women as young as 14 and sometimes even younger, marrying them. And it has been really disturbing for us to read that. And we're not okay with older women, sexually manipulating very much younger men either, because that's obviously also objectionable. But what we're seeing here is women reversing that patriarchal control. Older men, even though they do this to girls as young as 14 when they're in their 40s, are suddenly really alarmed when the genders are reversed.
They're not afraid when they're marrying a 13-year-old, but they're afraid when a matron is maybe inducting a 16-year-old into the religion of Dionysus. What I found fascinating about this is that young men were put in the power of usually older women, although there were also younger women in the cult who had power and older men because these men had been indoctrinated when they were younger and now were a part of the cult. And these women were able to exert control and influence over these younger men. These women could pick their sexual partners. They had power over how these men were able to worship their god. And to me, this is a real reversal of the strict patriarchy of ancient Rome. And frankly, I kind of feel like the gender fluid Dionysus would kind of approve. So the Senate became so afraid of what was going on at these bacchanals that they saw shutting them down as a matter of the utmost importance. And again, we're quoting from William Smith, who was drawing on Livy and Plato. Quote, "The initiated, according to Livy, did not only indulge in feasting and drinking at their meetings, but when their minds were heated with wine, as mine is now, they indulged in the coarsest excesses and the most unnatural vices. Young girls and youths were seduced, and all modesty was set aside. Every kind of vice was found here in its full satisfaction. But crimes did not remain confined to these meetings, for false witnesses, forgeries, false wills, and denunciations proceeded from this focus of crime. Poison and assassination were carried out under the cover of the society, and the voices of those who had been fraudulently drawn into these orgies would cry out against the shameless practices, were drowned by the shouts of the bacchantes and the deafening sounds of drums and cymbals."
Or maybe they just had their throats cut and they were tossed in a ravine.
Why the fuck not?
Oh, the god just spirited them away. That's a really convenient way of disposing of your enemies. So essentially what this quote is saying is that not only were people getting their fuck on with their general orgies at these festivals, they were also plotting assassinations, poisonings, and all kinds of crimes, including will forgeries.
We were talking about what the cold open for this show should be. We generally write a cold open for every episode. And we were talking about what it should be, and Jenny was like, oh, we should talk about the main ads again. And I was like, but we did it last episode. And so we got into this heated text conversation, and we were talking about what it actually would be like for a Roman senator who's presented with the fact that maybe their son is involved in these nighttime escapades, and what it would look like for them to realize that their neighbor had this will forged and now they're dead. And oh my God, there's this power going on behind the scenes to change society.
Yeah, this thing about will forgeries, Jen was the one who pointed this out to me, spoke to this really specific fear of the upper class that their young sons were being pulled into this cult where they were rewriting their father's wills and then killing them to inherit everything. To me, that was like a really indicative clue as to who is writing this account. It's the upper classes speaking about their fears here.
Who's shaping this narrative? It's clearly the upper classes telling this story. It's not the lower classes telling the story. If the lower classes were telling the story, it'd be a story about freedom and liberation and empowerment. But the upper classes are seeing it as cloak and dagger, like skulking in the nighttime to overthrow everything that we know.
So these Bacchic rites allowed all initiated people, slave, free, men and women, a place to worship, to drink, and to plot and plan to overthrow the fucking patriarchy and the ruling classes, which of course got these senators right where it hurt. And that's why we're seeing this thing come up about will forgeries here. They're afraid of a redistribution of wealth.
Fuck yeah!
People met in secret, and under the cover of clashing music and singing, they plotted their way to power and tossed their enemies in ravines, like you do. Let's stop a minute and talk about this lady, Pecula Ania, who we named in this quote.
So, backing up to Pecula Ania, she was the woman who instituted these changes that made the cult of Dionysus a lot more visible, and possibly a lot more violent, we don't know because think about who's telling the story, to the Roman society. So Pecula Ania was a real priestess of Dionysus. She was hugely influential at this time in the mystery cult, and men demonized her. She took this Dionysus thing and made, quote, wine-fueled violence and sexual promiscuity mandatory for all initiates.
I mean, I feel like the point is one of the things that Pecula Ania did that was really important was she made the Dionysus rituals not once a year, but like 5 days once a month.
Yeah, so the Dionysic rituals that the women were engaging in were 3 days once a year. Now, they were 5 days every month, and they weren't being done in broad daylight. No, they were being done under the cover of darkness. And again, our source is the Roman aristocracy. So this is what we found out on the Wikipedia page about Pecula Ania.
The Wikipedia page on Pecula Ania is like surprisingly great, so we just went ahead and quoted it.
Quote, the cult was thought to function as a hidden state within the state, with particular appeal to those with luitus omni, or fickle or uneducated minds. The lower classes, plebeians, women, the young, the morally weak, and, quote, men most like women, fucking eye rolled.
Fuck you, patriarchy. We're allowed to be non-binary.
They were thought most susceptible, but even men of the highest class were not immune. So the Roman Senate were not pleased about what was going on in the woods.
To put it mildly.
Oh, we're so unhappy with what was going on in the woods.
Shit is going down in the woods and we are not pleased. That's what was happening in the Roman Senate.
But here's the thing, Jenny. The Roman Senate couldn't just cancel the cult because there would have been a fucking uprising.
Also, Dionysus was a real god and he might have smote them.
Yeah. Dionysus was a real god with real people who worshipped him, and the people would actually lose their shit. So what they needed here to make their tiny penis fears founded was a whistleblower. And that whistleblower would bring to light all the horrible things that the Dionysian worshippers were doing. They would drag it out into the light because people were so secretive about these rituals. But what if we could find someone who engaged in those rituals and was willing to tell us about it, who was willing to unburden their soul for us?
And give us all the gory details. So they got their whistleblower. According to the accounts, this was a sex worker and an ex-Maenad whose name was Hispala Facenia. And this woman gave testimony that sent shockwaves throughout Roman society. So Hispala Facenia described all these violent, sexy rites in vivid detail. So in 186 BC, the Roman Senate decided it needed to crack down on these Bacchic meetings. And this testimony from Hispala Facenia gave them exactly the pretext they needed to do that. They rounded up all the priests, priestesses, and initiates of the Bacchic mysteries for trial, and shit got serious fast. No one was allowed to leave Italy. Many people committed suicide to avoid being caught up in the purge. Over 7,000 people were put on trial, and their trial lasted 30 days. And here's another quote from William Smith about what this was like. Quote, Rome was almost deserted, for the innocent as well as those guilty had reason to fear. The punishment inflicted on those who were convicted of worshipping Dionysus varied according to the degree of their guilt. Some were thrown into prison, others were put to death. The women were surrendered to their parents or husbands that they might receive their punishments in private. The consuls, then, were ordered by the Senate to destroy all bacchanalia throughout Rome and Italy, with the exception of such altars or statues of the god as had existed there from ancient times. In order to prevent a restoration of the Bacchic orgies, The celebrated decree was issued commanding that no bacchanalia should be held either in Rome or in Italy, that if anyone should think such ceremonies necessary, or if he could not neglect them without scruples or making atonements, he should apply to the praetor Urbanus, who might then consult the Senate. If the permission should be granted to him in an assembly of the Senate consisting of not less than 100 members, he might solemnize the Bacchic Sacra, but no more than 5 persons were to be present at the celebration. There should be no common fund and no master of the Sacra or priest.
So let's just break this down because that was a really long quote, but really important.
Please.
So people fled Rome. They were like, I'm out.
Yeah, Rome was like a ghost town.
A ghost town. There was just tumbleweeds going through.
Right.
The cult of Bacchus was completely disbanded, and only the super ancient statues and temples were allowed to stand because the god could still smite you.
They still believed that Dionysus or Bacchus was a real god and he might smite you if you took out his ancient shit, so people avoided that.
So we had to keep them, but also
no one was allowed now in Rome or Italy in general to worship Bacchus/Dionysus.
But if you had a legit religious reason and you needed to worship Bacchus, say you were a farmer who had a vineyard and you really needed a good harvest, you could apply to a praetor who would then ask a senate of 100 members, 100 people, if you could go ahead and worship. And then, assuming that they agreed to your request, you couldn't have more than 5 people at your ceremony, and you couldn't have a priest or priestess because the Senate had outlawed priests or priestesses. So let's just break this down. You had to pay off your praetor, then you had to pay off 100 senators to be allowed to have this sacred worship.
And that's the thing. It's got to have come down to bribes. That is how things functioned in ancient Rome a lot of the time. And if you just wanted to have this one very small ceremony with 5 people and no priest or priestess, first off, 100 people needed to be corralled to the same room to debate whether or not you were allowed to do this. No doubt you had to bribe most of these people. And the cost would have been tremendous.
They would have been tremendous. So the only people who would be allowed to afford this would have been people who own things like the latifundia and the upper class. So you can see that this is already creating a massive divide.
Is it even a real Bacchic ceremony if you don't have a priest or priestess present? That's my question. This might not even have been valid to real believers of Dionysus. A real Bacchic ritual was not something that the Senate could allow. And the worship of Bacchus had to be carefully measured and guarded to keep people from giving into the power of the god, a god who stood for the underdogs, a god who was able to give women notions like that they had power over men and that maybe, just maybe, there was more to this world than carefully organized order of the Roman Republic.
I call such fucking bullshit. First off, to me, this whole Roman aristocracy being terrified of women with a tiny morsel of power. That's all it is to me. Or people who have been brought into the Republic who have a slightly different religion. This is so saying, well, we don't understand what you're doing and we're not a part of it because we're 45 plus and we're senators. And if you're not going to let us into your party, we're going to smash your party.
They're obviously demonizing women and non-binary people and people at the margins of society, definitely slaves, from having a religion of their own. That is definitely going on, a religion that shut out the patriarchy. But here's the thing, Jen.
Oh, are you going to tell me there's a rebuttal to this?
It's on the record. At least 2 wars were planned by priests and priestesses of Dionysus. Salvius, the ringleader of the Second Servile War, and the Thracian ladies, Spartacus's consort and spin doctor, were both priests and priestesses of Dionysus, and they both played huge parts in the Second and Third Servile Wars. And the First Servile War was led by someone who was a priest of a different goddess.
What kind of goddess is she? This fascinated me.
So this was a Syrian mermaid goddess.
Yes, mermaid goddess.
But the leader of the First Servile War, the guy who was the priest of the mermaid goddess, somebody named Eunice, the tactics that he used and the way his rituals were described are very similar to the Bacchic rites. So these kinds of religions, I'm not on the side of the patriarchy here, but I'm also not going to say that they didn't have reason to worry. These religions had real power to destabilize.
Absolutely. And I'm totally on the side of destabilize, but there was a legitimate fear here.
I mean, I'm on the side of eating the rich.
This podcast is on the side of eating the rich.
Eat the rich, bitches! So the Romans couldn't erase Dionysus altogether because he was still a powerful god, and if they did that, that would create an uprising that they couldn't handle. So what they did was sanitize him. They merged Dionysus with Liber Pater, an older Roman god of wine, and created the Liberalia festival. This was celebrated on the 17th of March, around the same time the city Dionysia was celebrated in Athens, and was a more innocent festival.
Priests and priestesses wore their ivy garlands, and they carried wine and honey cakes and meats to an altar to be burnt for the worship of Liber.
Gotta carry those meats.
Boys who turned 16 were given their toga virlis. And this, again, to me, is all about making these boys men earlier so that they are not under the power of women.
There's such an interesting thing that we saw about older women inducting younger men under the age of 18 into the religion of Dionysus. And this kind of subverts that by taking boys and doing this coming of age ceremony during this festival that's sort of like saying you're outside of the bounds of women in the Dionysian rites taking you over. They're taking them and saying you're men, you're outside of the control of women, you're heads of your own households, you're now qualified to control a household of women.
So this was meant to be a, quote, free time for people. But, Jenny, it was organized freedom, which, is that really freedom?
Is organized freedom even freedom? No.
To me, it's like the Disney World of freedom. It was shiny and nice and pumped really good smells into the air, but it was also lacking in the danger and real freedom of the Bacchic rites. But it would take more than a Roman decree and a purge of 7,000 people to kill the wild god Dionysus. And while the worship of Bacchus was kept under lock and key, out in the country, amongst the farms, in the colonies, the rites and rituals of Dionysus continued in secret. The common folk, the women, and the slaves continued their worship. They were cautious not to let their masters, husbands, or fathers know the truth. But Dionysus couldn't be denied, and Dionysus would lead them to freedom. He would show them the way forward. He would give them the tools they needed to throw off their Roman masters and make the Republic shake. And in our next 2 episodes, we'll tell you exactly how that happened.
So we'll be back in 2 weeks.
And in the meantime, you can chat to us on social, on Twitter at Ancient Hist Fan, and on Facebook and Instagram at Ancient History Fangirl.
So we have a few Patreon subscribers to shout out today.
We've got Arrogant Roman Lad, which, oh my God, what an amazing name.
2 thumbs up, thank you.
Felicity Malpass.
Jorge Torre.
And Skylar Mapp Williams, thank you.
Thank you so much for your support.
You're the reason we can keep making this podcast a reality. And thank you to all of our $2 patrons. We don't shout you out in the episodes, but we so appreciate your support every month.
You are the people who make this podcast possible, and we cannot thank you enough for your support.
And also, if you don't want to give us any money because you're financially not able, I feel you. I'm frequently in that box. Here's the thing. If you leave us a review on wherever you listen to your podcast, it makes a massive difference. It helps us get seen in the algorithms, and it boosts us up the charts.
Thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you in 2 weeks.
There's a world where legends race across city skylines, romance blossoms in glittering ballrooms, and there's magic around every corner. It's a world known to many as Great Britain. You've seen the action on screen. Now visit the real star of the show. Visit Great Britain. To discover more, go to tripadvisor.com/Great Britain.